I'm Sean Gresh from Northeastern University's College of Professional Studies. I'm here with you with the third week, my set of remarks for week number 3 in our course on personal branding. I welcome my students, and I also welcome those of you from the YouTube audience who are interested in the subject of personal branding. This week, we're going to focus on a plan for your final project. It's very, very important, and it'll give you the opportunity to bring together all the things that you've been thinking about, discussing, and reading in the various textbooks that I've asked you to read. So let's begin. First of all, I should note that there's only one discussion topic this week, and you'll see it's pretty clearly outlined. What I want you to do is to brainstorm about what your final project is going to be, and probably the most important thing that I'm asking you to develop is a vision of where you want to take your audience, that is the audience you're appealing to communicate your brand or strengthen your brand with that audience. So let me begin. First of all, I want you to try to be very focused. I've read all your entries for the discussion this week about your particular interest and what some of your aspirations are. But I think the key that you have to do, as one or two of you expressed it very well, is to narrow your focus and decide on what your priority is going to be. Now, in developing a personal brand, you're going to be doing lots of things to do that, but for this course, I want you just to concentrate on one thing. For example, the first thing that you would need to concentrate on is who is your audience. For example, I know that a couple of you are interested in doing podcasts, and I think Eve is interested in doing that, and a couple others I think as well. But if you're going to do that, then just focus on what you can do over the next 3 weeks or so in developing a couple of podcasts that you can then share with the class and perhaps share online. Okay, the next thing that I need you to do is decide on the objective of whatever it is that you're going to decide. If it's a podcast, if it's a Twitter account, a Facebook account, beefing up or developing your LinkedIn account, it could be a host of things. In fact, what I did is I've listed here many of the things that you could focus on, and these are just a few examples, but as you know, as the internet advances and more innovative things appear, there are lots of ways of doing this, from Instagram to doing interviews, podcasts, blogs, developing a website, doing a presentation, writing articles, establishing a Weibo account or a WeChat account, etc. So once you decide on that, then you have to decide on what actions are you going to take in the coming weeks to achieve your goal. It's a short-term goal right now because it's just one aspect of developing your brand. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be very actively engaged in the discussion, and then probably by the end of next week, I hope to be able to offer my time so that I can discuss with you one-on-one about any questions you have about this project, etc., which is due, by the way, at the end of week 6. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to conclude my very short set of remarks here, and I'm going to borrow from one of my students' books, Content Rules. That's written by my former student Ann Hanley and C.C. Chapman, and it's an excellent book. It's called Content Rules, and it has a lot of similarities with Ann's other book, which I'm asking you to read, which is a great source book for content, because one of the things that Ann and her colleagues preach, it's probably the most important lesson you will ever learn, is to make sure that whatever you do, whatever you say, whatever you communicate to audiences has to be high quality, has to be clear. And so here are a few things, and I'll borrow from some of our content rules, and I'll read them off. One of them is that you, no matter what format you use or what medium you use, you are a publisher. You're the speaker. So it's your voice, and that voice has to be authentic. That is, has to be your voice and not someone else's voice. So when you're putting together, whether it's a blog, a website, or whatever, it's very important to do a couple things. Number one is to make sure you know what your objective is and why you're doing this. And I was really struck, and I mentioned it a couple times already, that the reference to the TED Talk that Eve mentioned on why and how one is motivated is really important. So I'd recommend that you take a look at that TED Talk if you haven't already looked at it. The other thing I think is really important is that you really reimagine things. You don't necessarily have to treat everything, but you might take messages that you see on the internet, etc., and websites, and reimagine them and use them in a different way and come at it from a different angle and share with people. And that brings me to one of the other content rules that Anne and her partner talk about, that is to share information. That way, if you know who your audience is and what their problems are or what their concerns are, what their questions are, one of the things that should be your motivation is just sharing things that will add insights to your audience, will help them solve problems, etc. And that's one of your motivations, because you want to help the person whom you're addressing your messages to. And finally, and this is very important, and I want to go back to it, it's a theme that runs throughout my life and all my courses that I teach. It's the theme of telling stories, because stories are everything. And what I want to do is take a look, and there's a section at the beginning of Content Rules where Anne Hanley and her partner, her co-author, talk about marketing as all being about great content, and exactly, they're about stories. And one of the things she talks about, and it reminds me of what Kurt Vonnegut, the author, the great author, said once, is that when you write stories, what you do is you create a character, you get him or her into trouble, and then you spend the rest of the story explaining how he or she gets out of trouble. So Anne puts it this way. She says, what's the story? She says, boy meets girl. They fall in love. Boy loses girl. Boy, and sometimes the girl, is miserable for most of the action. They finally get back together again. They get married. That's the formula, by the way, for every romantic story, whether it's a romantic comedy or not, that you'll see. So how and why they break up, and then what they do to get back together is what makes the story kind of interesting. How interesting would that same movie or book be if the boy meets girl, they fall in love, they get married? So think about that, because you want to be telling stories, and very often these stories can consist of case studies. They're problem-solving stories. They're stories about how somebody had a jam. They had to deal with this obstacle or that obstacle in starting their company, etc. And here's the answer. Here's what they came up with, and these are the struggles that they went through. So if you look at storytelling, that's what it's all about, and that's what you're going to be all about as well. And finally, well, there are two other things. One of the things you might want to do in telling your stories is use the element of surprise. One of the things that I've done, and give me a second. Okay, I'm surprising you. I would like you to look at this. This is something I've used actually when I've talked to my grandchildren on the internet, and I'm able to get this to move and so forth. And actually, believe it or not, if you had the talent to do that, I don't, by the way, but to use something really effective like this, like a puppet or whatever, it's very, very effective to get messages across, and maybe it'll get more attention. And if you look very carefully at some of the great short YouTube videos where somebody explains something and they do the illustrations. The illustrations are quickly moving, etc. They're pretty amazing, and they're very, very imaginative, and they're things that make you remember. So when you're doing things, every once in a while, do something that'll catch the imagination of your audience. When I teach, the other course that I teach in person, the course on interpersonal communications, what I've done sometimes is I've stood on top of a desk to illustrate something, or in one case I actually lay down on the floor to explain something. It's a long story short, but to explain something which got my students' attention, and then I hope that they remember that the story and why I did that. Anyway, the last thing I wanted to mention to you about whatever you develop is try to make it interactive. Ask questions, ask provocative questions. Ask for people's opinion. If you do that and you have an interactive element in your story, it's going to be much more powerful. You're going to have many, many more followers. You're going to be more valuable to whomever it is you're trying to communicate to. Well, that's it for this week. I hope that you continue to read every one of the assigned readings in the textbook. I particularly am interested in in Tom Standage's book. It's an excellent book, and it ties into what we're doing today. I'm very interested in hearing your response to Stand Out as we continue to read this and discuss this each week. It's a marvelous book, and also, well, I guess that's about it. Anyway, we'll be with you during the week in this discussion, and look forward to hearing your input. Thank you.